I'm just going to do a very quick introduction of myself, just so that you also get the context of what my background is and how things have panned out for me. I have studied applied art straight after 10th grade because that time that option was available. You didn't have to do a 12th. So essentially, I was a person who could draw and I was pushed into art, saying, you can draw, you're good at it, do it. And that's how I started off with applied art. After that, after I finished applied art, I studied animation at the National Institute of Design with Ayaz. Ayaz was my batchmate. And I then worked in the animation industry for about 7 years, after which I started illustrating for children's books. And then a lot of things followed. There are a lot of, I'm basically going to respond to the idea of urban sketching as a ritual, and also what my connection and my journey with the whole ritual has been. Okay, first of all, very cliched slide, but if you look at the idea of ritual, it's something that's done consistently in the same manner. And that's exactly what I want to focus on today. So, as an art student, the ritual for an art student is to take your sketchbook out and sketch. Also, I was an art student at the time when there was no internet, and therefore there was no other window to the world. And it was a done thing that you had to, the only way that you could practice and you could be a really good master drawer was to be able to continuously keep drawing. So that's how it all started. And I studied applied art in Pune, and the whole the whole group of artists who used to sketch or study or hone their practice beyond the classroom used to pretty much work in the same way. There was this whole clan of people who did watercolors in a similar manner, and I just naturally moved towards watercolor because it was an easier medium to carry outdoors. So these are actually my sketches that were done in like 93, 94. And it was just about just basically as a young student, and I was all of 15 and 15, 16 when I was in this at this time of the, when I was studying in college. And if somebody was working in watercolor, I worked in watercolor because there really wasn't that much of exposure or that much to understand which direction you're going. Okay, if you could put out one image like this, and you can see the sort of images that were done at that time. These were a part of the same time, a college project. Again, you saw your seniors, you say, oh, great technique of color pencil. So I used that. It was a project that was done in the fruit and vegetable market. So a lot of these drawings, I used to go sketch within the market every day. And at the end of the year, you had to display a set of styles and techniques which would bring that whole project and that whole story of whatever you were exploring as a subject. And I had chosen the fruit and vegetable market. So these are my sketches from the year 1995. Now, after I went into animation, of course, we were drawing a lot. And then I worked with an animation studio. So the animation studio put out two films. And I very naturally, because of the fact that I used to sketch a lot outdoors when I was in school and stuff, I very naturally just became a part of the team where I started working on the backgrounds and styling the film. And both of these, like the first one, Raju and I, we worked in oil pastels, and we had used the inspiration was Monet, so we wanted that little oil painting feel, but we had used oil pastels for it. And the second film, which is Mare, I had largely predominantly worked in watercolors. But the point is that I left my watercolor practice back at somewhere around 1995, 1996. And after that, I didn't really work in watercolor. So I just had a memory or a muscle memory, I would say, of the fact that I'd worked in watercolor. And I just applied that to the film. And it was challenging. I did not design the space, but I painted. And the painting was in response to the person who was designing the space. And because this film was done during, like, with other commercial projects, every time a new commercial project would come, this film would take a back seat. And so every time I'd come back and look at the backgrounds, and I'm like, what have I done? It's such a shoddy job. I would redo the whole set again. So actually, I ended up doing the entire set of backgrounds, and both these films are on YouTube, so you can always watch them later. I ended up doing the entire set of backgrounds twice. Anyway, so that was my 7 year stint in animation, after which I was confined to the house because I had smaller, younger children, and I wanted to also start looking at what I can do as on my own, because animation was a full-time job and I could not do a full-time job. So I thought of doing children's book illustration, which was the closest to animation. But the thing with the children's book illustration is that I had no portfolio to show anyone because I had no work in that space. So I had to start somewhere, and I very naturally again navigated to watercolor. And I didn't even know that whole space. I lost out on 2, 3 projects because people they didn't think that I could manage it. They didn't think I had the experience. Anyway, then I did get a break with Pratham and another company in Delhi. And I took the easiest option because I knew no better. So I just started creating textures, and then I started cut pasting the textures in Photoshop, which I was very adept with. And that's how these children's books worked initially. It was almost like a little bit of a push. But honestly, to be very honest with myself, I had lost the confidence of being able to draw and paint or take on something that had the challenge of being able to draw and paint. So these are my children's book work, which were largely, then I just moved towards the digital medium because it became easier for me to not bother with the actual tactile medium. And these were then my drawings from that, roughly until maybe 2012, 2013, or a little after that. And there was a lot of restriction in the way I drew, in the way I imagined, because it was almost like my window to the world had just gone away because I had stopped sketching, I had stopped practicing, and it was very frustrating because I was not used to failures. And so to embrace that failure, to be able to say that what next, was a real challenge for me. And at that point, I did somewhere then suddenly one day realize that it is about me not having any practice for myself. Like, my window to the world cannot be a Google window. I have to be able to go out, look, see, understand my environment, and then respond to it as an artist. I cannot respond to it sitting within a closed space and looking at it on a screen, which was pretty much what happened. So in the year 2000 and roughly 2016, I joined a sketching group, a local sketching group. And this was my sketch, my very first 2 sketches. And they were very disheartening, right? So, because, like I said, so I did not go back to any more sketch meets for a whole year. And a whole year, I just kept watching people. I saw the urban sketcher groups form in different cities, and I was following someone in Chicago. And then suddenly I realized now we do have one in Bombay. And so I then started going regularly to the one in Bombay from 2017 onwards. And so these are roughly around my sketches around the time of 2017, 2016, where I had to actually, one is pull myself up and say, this needs to be done. Because I was really scared. Like this Dhobi Ghat, which, I mean, you can see now. I had no idea of what size of paper to use, what kind of art materials to use. I said, okay, I know that I have to do this, and I just have to do this. And so whatever result came, some things I could respond to very spontaneously. For example, this sketch done at Banganga. One day I had some Copic markers, so I pulled them out and I said, oh, don't no need to draw so much. I can just do it with some lines. And it happened. So some sketches, there was a lot of spontaneity. It's not like I did not have the craft. It's not like I did not have the practice, but it's just that I did not have the right practice. So I have never stopped drawing. I've never stopped working, but the whole, how much I did was very limited. So this is the result at that time. And then, of course, I continued and I completely persisted. So there were small wins. One day, the owner of Metro Cinema called us to sketch outside and inside, and then he bought the sketch. And now that I look at it, it's like such a sad sketch. And I sold it to him for 5,000 rupees or 3,000 rupees, something like that. And then a couple of years later, the skill had gotten slightly better. And then these four paintings were put up at an exhibition, and Firoza Godrej managed to pick them up. So then these were like small wins, which kind of made me feel like, okay, this is worth practicing or pushing. So what happened is that when COVID hit, I was in the middle of that rhythm of sketching, going out. And when COVID hit, I was like, whatever happens, I'm not going to stop sketching. I went and I didn't know how long it'll last, but everyone thought it was going to last not for very long. So what I did is I went and surveyed my entire building apartment complex, and I made a note of all the things one could sketch within the space. So the garbage dump, the stuff that's just lying around in people's garages, broken cycles. Somebody brings a bike. If I could do nothing, then I would just put out some still life and paint it. But one thing, and then you see these wires were hanging somewhere, so I painted those. It's just that I was just determined to make sure that I don't stop working. And another thing was that suddenly, because of COVID, everybody from the outside who used to go to work, and my house used to pretty much be empty because I work from home, everyone was at home. So it became like a non-stop environment where things were constantly needed to be done, and I constantly needed to speak to someone, and so it became crazy. So this kind of became my little space of that 1 2 hours where I would just step out in the building itself, even sit outside on the steps and do something, but not be in the house and keep practicing. So things like these two sketches here were actually the same one. I sketched it 4 times, the same thing, this potted plant and this little thing on the side, just to make sure that whatever I had in my head, I got it right. And early sketches, which I'd say I really loved. And someone then looked at it and said, "Hey, I want to buy this. Why are you sketching in a sketchbook?" So that sort of then, until then, I'd not even thought of making this like any kind of art or anything. But then I slowly started to move on to loose sheets of paper. So when COVID eased out a little bit, I'd basically sit in my car and sketch wherever I got parking. And the city was pretty empty, and whatever I could do, I would do. I made friends with this one bunch of guys who used to store these water drums in their space. And their space was like it had all kinds of junk. So it was a great space to just go to. Nobody would bother you. So I one day I sketched the junk there. One day I sketched one junk scooter there. This this was the meter room in my building itself, where on that recce that I did when COVID hit to see what I could sketch. I found this quite interesting and I decided to sketch it. And it just so happened that the moment COVID relaxed a little bit, all these carbon meters changed to some shiny plastic meters. And this suddenly the sketch became like invaluable because these meters were no longer there. And you see these road rollers or these JCBs or whatever. I used to sketch a lot of those because when COVID hit, because the streets were empty and a lot of construction work started in the city. And I saw that things were changing very rapidly, and I realized that now this is the time to document because so many things are disappearing very rapidly. And just in that same year, during Inktober, I was putting out a presentation for someone, for a group I was teaching, and I was trying to put together a storyboard, and I came across these very beautiful black and white images done very beautifully and simply. And it occurred to me that I'd like to explore black and white. When Inktober came, and obviously during that whole COVID time, there wasn't that much commercial work or anything that was really happening. So I decided to do Inktober in simply in black and white. And I did 31 of these. Every single day I'd go out and I'd do one sketch of anything in the city. But what also started happening during that time was that I started speaking to these people, because once you're sketching, people will come and talk to you. So when I started talking to these people, their stories were just incredible. Like this guy, the craftsmen of Lucknow are usually making these wooden temples for people's homes. And his story was incredible because obviously his employer was a Hindu, did not give him any remuneration during COVID, and he continued to come to work. His family survived only on vada pav. The moment COVID relaxed, he traveled for a whole hour and a half to 2 hours to come in a bus, continue to work in the shop, and for barely any money because the employer just wouldn't pay him. So that happened, and then I put in a proposal for, and also at that time, also what happened is because people were confined to their homes and indoor spaces, urban sketchers wanted to expand their whole window to the world in different ways. So they said, okay, we are putting out a call for a reportage. You can report on anything in your city, and I had 31 of these, and I had some incredible stories about how people had just survived during COVID, just the stories of the marginalized. So I put that in as a proposal. And for some reason, they came back saying, "Oh, we love your proposal, but we would like you to explore Craftsmen of Mumbai." Now, when you look at Mumbai as a city, you don't think of Mumbai as a craft city. But it's very difficult to explain to the foreigner who has never been to India that I can't do crafts of Mumbai, because there is nothing like crafts of Mumbai. So I said, never mind, I'll figure something out. And I then started looking to see what were the crafts that I could actually pick up. And I documented like 6 stories. So one was the sculptors. So the sculptors who work in the clay which does not get fired. So it was them I documented. Then I documented these same woodworkers. Then I documented the potters of Dharavi, the basket weavers, and I documented the Zardozi guys, the ones who do Zardozi. And that way I had 6 stories to share about what these people actually went through, what their day looks like, how do they manage on a day-to-day basis, how do their businesses get set up. So it the whole process then started moving into storytelling. And after that, the group did a whole process, incredible spaces that we all went to. So slowly what has started happening is that storytelling came to the forefront, and just sketching as a habit was one thing, but then when it started moving into story, it became all the more exciting, because suddenly you are connecting with the city, you're connecting with the people, you're being able to understand what the dynamic is. You've moved out of your cozy space, and you're actually down to reality, and you know what sort of, because if you've ever lived in Mumbai, you know that Mumbai is run by the people. It's an incredible city for the people, right? For the people, for who they are. And that's what it is. So this gentleman here, his father was one of the jewelers during the time of the British, and the British had commissioned about 10 or 25 necklaces of the same kind. So that cupboard that he was opening there was a cupboard that had close to 20, 30 compartments all hidden inside, because his father was a jeweler. So all these kind of very interesting stories came up, and it made the whole exercise a lot more fun. And I moved more into then understanding story and understanding the space around me, understanding the dynamic of the city. And then again, I definitely at that point also I kept feeling like I need a lot of more practice. I knew that there was a lot of things that I needed to work on visually. There were 2 people who put out a call for 2 plein-air workshops, not workshops, but just 2 plein air and sketching experiences. So I went to two places in Rajasthan. I went to Bundi, and right after that, I went to Jodhpur. So the total time that it took for this entire two thing was about 9 to 11 days, with nine to 10 days of intense. When I go to this place to as a part of this group, I am now making 4 sketches a day. So I am then I also started getting a rhythm of how much, because painting takes a lot of bandwidth and you need light and there's too many variables for painting. So in the morning I would paint, in the afternoon I would sketch. So that way what happened is, by the end of the like by the seventh or the eighth day, I was like, oh my God, I have to get up and perform again today. And so I was getting like really tired. But what the one really good thing that happened was that I started to think very fast, because I was problem solving for 9 days, like problem solving in terms of putting a visual together, in terms of understanding which visual works better than what, just problem solving in terms of how to capture this environment, capture the pulse of this place in that allotted time that you have. Then I suddenly realized that I was becoming freer. Like I was, the whole process was becoming more and more liberating for me, because I could now think really fast. And I realized that doing this 9 day intensive boot camp literally was really worth it. And then coming back to all the commercial work that I did, there was like a huge jump in the kind of work that then I delivered on as commercial projects. So this was done for a website, for someone who wanted to, for someone who was into health and wanted to use these ingredients for stuff. I saw a huge jump in the work. Things started coming back into into the commercial work. Like this guy, I had sketched him in Kashmir, and then I got to do a book cover on the city of Kashmir, and so I brought him back into that book cover. And even all of these things that I've sketched at the back were also part of my were a part of my sketching in my sketchbook. Similarly, I did this book on Bombay, and I there was so much reference I could actually take back from my sketchbook. So these three these three fisher women that you see at the bottom, I brought them into the illustration over here. And these were from my 2016, 2017 sketching. So you see they're still very amateurish, but I could still use them as a reference. And I could use so many things as references from my sketchbook and come back, which could then come back into illustration, into mainstream work. And that was really cool. The idea of just the understanding of the visual, the fundamentals, the composition, all of that started to take a jump. So these are my later works, which obviously are done post my entire sketching ritual, like I would call it. So these are, you can see from the initial works that I showed you, which were very rigid, they started to come so much more fluidity in the work that I was putting out commercially. So I could really see the value of being able to sketch and then bringing all that, just that understanding of how the picture works, how the picture plane works, bringing it back again into something that becomes of so much more value. So it became about, so one part of me was then doing children's books as well. One part of me was documenting the heritage of the city, the visual heritage of the city, doing a lot of city based art. And one part of me was teaching. Teaching was also really important, because the more I taught, the more I needed to articulate, and the more I needed to articulate, the more I needed to practice. So it was again pushing the boundaries every time. And all of that together started also pushing me to do a lot of other things. So, in the whole process, of course, of documenting, Windows has always been my love for, because I've also grown up in a city where the windows were very beautiful. Whatever I saw out of my own window were very beautiful windows. And this little window here that you see, although the rest of the windows are all from Mumbai, this little window that you see is of my own house in Pune. And so I did this very large piece for an exhibition, which was for a group show, which was almost like a skyline of windows. Because what happens in the city of Mumbai is that there are so many, there are so many such stunning buildings which have now lived their life. And if you look out of these buildings, there'll be one or two windows that have been preserved, and the rest of it are just trashed. So I took the beautiful ones out of that and did this very large piece, which was about 5 feet by 3 feet. And I pieced it all together with a frame. And so then I've been working consistently in this same area. I did a whole series of images on Hyderabad because I also realized that people are really connecting to their own cities, and therefore they want something that is connected to their cities on their up on their walls. I had a platform with Baro Art. They wanted to keep my work. They wanted me to do more shows, which were city based. So I went to Hyderabad. I looked at Hyderabad, sketched there, came back with stories, came back with reference images, did a whole series on Hyderabad, did a whole series on Goa. And then I had the opportunity of putting up a solo show. So all of that practice of the past so many years then had to now be put into a solo show, which was going to go up in a design gallery. So the idea of, because of sketching, you're tuning into the environment, you're tapping into patterns, you're understanding what's happening around you, you're getting a sense of the dynamic. So I decided to focus this show on the idea of repetition, because there were so many ideas, but they could be enhanced. The storytelling would be enhanced if there was repetition. And what happened when the show was put up was that one part of it came from me, one part of this whole interpretation of what I was seeing and what I had put up came from me. And then 10 parts came from the viewer. Because every time somebody looked at the art, they looked at it in a different way. They looked at it from their lens, from their point of view, and brought so many more things back into the whole thing. And what I realized at that point is that's actually the job of the art, where it needs to interact with the viewer. The viewer needs to resonate with it. It needs to speak to the viewer. And the viewer should be able to make their own meaning, their own story, their own connections with that art. So this particular piece was Marine Drive. And these are a set of three. And it was called the Shared Horizon because, again, part of it came from me because it was like almost questioning the idea of public space in the city. Everyone flocks to Marine Drive because that's the glorified public space that you have in the city. When you're sitting within a few inches of someone, you're not judging them, you don't know them. It still becomes your own private space. So I came in with that idea, with that intention, and then so many people came and added so many things to it. Somebody said that Marine Drive is coined as the most democratic space in the city. Somebody also pointed out that there are a whole bunch of people looking outwards, and there are a whole bunch of people looking inwards. There's a whole line of bags which nobody's really bothered about, because all the people who those bags belong to are actually looking on that side. So many people on their phones, so many people just relaxing. So much more meaning came into it after the art actually went up. I came in with one idea, and then the whole thing expanded to a whole other level of storytelling. Similarly for these, so one part of the solo show, the intention of the solo show is also to not lose out on what my work was doing with the audience. There was a certain connection that the audience could build with my work over a period of 4 years. And I didn't want to lose that connection. So I still wanted to stay within that space, and still have like larger questions, larger ideas to be put out. So this was called something, I don't know, remember. But it was just about the clockwork that helps the city function. And they're small, menial jobs, okay? Like this guy washing the radish every single day, cleaning the radish, making it sparkling white so that it comes to your table white. Or when you pick it up from the market, it's white. Or the fact that Dharavi is actually like a central point that is connected to the city, and this guy making sambar in Dharavi. How Dharavi facilitates actually the whole city. So all the idli sambar that you get around the city, everything leaves Dharavi at 4 a.m. and travels around the city, and everybody is getting it actually from the same source. Nobody's making their own stuff and selling it individually. Or some things that have actually you don't really get to see this guy repairing the telephone, this telephone unit, because the landline itself is defunct now. So many of these things came working by hand. Another thing, very very sad, this chap here who's embellishing the Ganpati, he used to sit outside the college where I teach, and he would do this job. And just last week I had not seen him for a while, so I went there to check where he was, and I showed the lady who was there, showed her the picture, and she was like, this guy died like 6 months back. And he died because he was working two jobs, and he had not slept for a straight 48 hours. He got a paralytic attack and he passed away. And so that is actually the reality of the hustlers. Like it started to become now about really digging in depth to bring these sort of stories out. And one may one may say that one doesn't want to be politically active or inclined, but then there are these very underlying smaller themes which are, in a sense, hitting upon all these points, if you get it. Then the other thing that I have been observing is these water tankers. So I've lived in the city of Mumbai for 26 years now, and I have never seen so many water tankers in the city. So I always thought that there are so many high rises coming up. So obviously people are running out of water, and these people are supplying people with water, right? But that's not the case, because one is that when I started investigating this whole story and when I started painting, I got to know that they're also taking water. So all these buildings which have bore wells are basically selling water for close to a lakh of rupees a month or more to these water tankers, who are then running around the city and then giving water to whoever doesn't get enough water. So all this dynamic and all this storytelling started to sort of surface. This was another series called The City That Never Sleeps. And it was basically of all the people who are completely exhausted with this 24 by 7 hustle. And also all these paintings were given the very popular names of how Mumbai is glorified, like City of Dreams, Maya Nagari, City That Never Sleeps, all of that. It's all very glorified and good for the person who's living in a high rise, but then somebody else is paying the price of it. And when all these pieces were put up in the so these were given those names, and then in the room that where we displayed all these pieces, we had basically put up a quote saying, by Suketu Mehta, saying, "Come on board and we will adjust," something to that effect. And then this was another series that I did, which were of all the another take on the windows, which were all going away. And I have lived in one such house in Pune, and I know the value of these absolutely stunning windows, and I cannot take my eyes off them. Also, the idea of the fact that Bombay is called the melting pot. And this entire series of 12 images had, it was almost a time travel through the through the city or the history, because there's something made in stone, there's something made in iron, there's something made in wood, there's art deco. So that's everything, right? It's that, and it's everyone who's come to the city, because it's obviously a city of migrants. Everyone who's come to the city has come with their own has come with their own aesthetic, come with their own resources, and then put the whole city together. And unfortunately, we are losing that entire visual heritage of the city, or that visual character which makes the city. So these have always been my favorites. So there's just a close up, like a scanned versions of the images. And then another thing that so some ideas are obviously not very mainstream. One of them is this. I wasn't very sure how the audience would receive it, but I wanted to look at these electrical boxes, which serve as so much more than just electrical boxes. Because the whole idea of Mumbai is connected to livelihood, right? Everyone is coming here to make money. It's called that city where you can come and you can make some money on anything. Everything, like even a defunct telephone box or an electrical box, is basically a source of livelihood for someone. Okay, so be it the guy has his business around it, this key maker has basically made his entire, I'll zoom in a little bit, hold on. This entire electrical box was his advertising. Okay, then this guy had made his shop around this, like this cobbler was running his shop, and so no amount of saying that it's danger, like it was deterring anyone from having a livelihood. And then there is two people who come on the weekends with this cow, which they pick up from a random place. So it's not their cow. They go to a tabela, they pick up the cow, they come here, they tie the cow to the electrical box, and then they make money on the feed of the cow. Okay, that's how interesting this whole little jigsaw is. Small things like in town, you'll see very different ads being put up from the suburb. So in the Bandra and areas like that, you'll see acting schools, actors, airport security, all of that, those kind of flyers being put up. And in town, it will be more like Unani, driver. So all of that speaks to different audiences. And in a lot of ways, it tells you so much about what you're doing, where you're living, and what is its dynamic. Then this was another series called Men at Work. And I actually wanted to have a lot of these men at work more than this. But I did only these. And this was about the stormwater drain department guys who were given the job of coming to clean, or to not even clean, sorry, they were not cleaning, they were just measuring. Their job for the day was just to measure the stormwater drain. So make sure all the measurements were okay. So this was a sort of a frame by frame breakup of their entire action, where one guy in charge of one job. Okay, so this guy has to he has to hit the manhole cover and yank it open. Once it's yanked open, then he just has to stand there. He removes this grill, he stands there with the grill, that's his job. Then somebody else comes with something else and starts measuring. Once his measurement is done, then this guy has a measuring tape. He was the guy only with the measuring tape. So, the idea of so many people doing this one job, first of all, talks about how many people we have and they all need to be employed in some way. The other thing is somebody came and said it's because they're men. If there was a woman, she would have done the job. Like it would have been one person doing the job. But it was really interesting. And then this last guy was the guy who was supposed to come and just write down all the measurements. So this was like a 12 frame breakup of this scene. That's all. So I have a really concise and put in a minimum number of images. But yeah, that's it for me for now.